This episode is brought to you by Christendom, a big tent platform for Catholic content creators. Say goodbye to endlessly browsing for Catholic content. At Christendom, we make it simple to follow, share, and save your favorite creators' content. Join our community at christendom.app. It's free.
Hello, everybody. I am John Allen, and this is Last Week in the Church, the show where we look back over the last 7 days on the Vatican beat, and as ever, we've got a full menu for you this week. So we begin with Get Over It. There is a new project purporting to provide background on cardinals that the authors of this project perceive to be Papabile, that is, candidates to be the next pope. Now, whenever someone starts speculating about the next pope while the current one is still alive, somebody is going to object that that's inappropriate or boorish or impious or whatever. My response to that is, get over it. I'll unpack why that's the case in a moment. Second up this week, we've got cruising in Corsica. Pope Francis made a quick day trip to Corsica on Sunday. We'll run down what he was doing there and the news highlight of the event. Third, we've got the weaponization of work. As the Vatican deals with all kinds of labor difficulties, this past week, a couple of Italian media outlets attempted to inject an ideological element into all of this. Vatican workers are trying to slap that down because they don't want it to distract from the heart of their complaints. We'll break down what is going on. Fourth, we've got Now You See It, Now You Don't, a Jubilee event for LGBTQ plus Catholics. Appeared on the Jubilee calendar, then disappeared, and now is set to reappear. We'll explain the bouncing ball. And then finally this week, we've got FaceTime with Francis. 3 journalists working on scandals surrounding the sodality of Christian life, a Catholic movement founded in Peru that has since spread to other parts of the world, had some time with Pope Francis this past Monday to present the fruits of their reporting regarding various forms of scandal that have been surrounding the organization. One of those journalists was the Vatican correspondent of Crux, Elise Ann Allen, who you may also know as my wife. We'll explain what happened and what it might all mean. All that and more is waiting for you in this episode of Last Week in the Church, so please stay where you are because I will be right back. All right, everybody, thanks for being with us. Happy Tuesday to you. Happy December 17th, 2024. And a happy birthday, Pope Francis. Today is the Holy Father's 88th birthday, born on December 17th in 1936. And, is wearing those 88 years quite well. Just took a busy trip over the weekend, which we will break down in a moment. But first, there's another sense in which his birthday has news significance this week, which is it is an inevitable law of life. It's almost like a Catholic version of the laws of thermodynamics, that when a pope gets old or gets sick or both, inevitably people start speculating about the next pope. And then, second law of Catholic thermodynamics, when some people start speculating about the next pope, other people will get upset about it. And the arguments are, first, it's simply inappropriate to talk about the next pope while the current one is still around, or that it's bad manners or, offensive. Others will argue that it's a political way of trying to weaken the current pope, trying to undercut him or turn him into a lame duck. In any event, the suggestion is there's something wrong with it and you shouldn't do it. And this comes up this past week because there is a new project that comes out of the United States, the College of Cardinals report, which is sponsored by a couple of conservative Catholic outfits in the States and produced by a couple of Catholic journalists who are also known to be fairly conservative, Edward Penton and Diane Montagna. And the fact that this has come out now has generated no small amounts of complaints. One, simply on the grounds that you shouldn't be doing it at all, and two, on the grounds that this is a conservative attempt to, project to an alternative future beyond a pope they just don't like because they think he's too liberal. And in response to both of these complaints, my response is, get over it. Number one, is it inappropriate to talk about the next pope? Not only is it not inappropriate, it's absolutely essential. The papacy is the most important soft power on the face of the earth. It can change history. If you don't believe that, I have a few former Soviet apparatchiks, whose lives were turned on their ear by Pope John Paul II that I would like you to speak with. And therefore, it is absolutely essential to talk about how that power might be deployed depending upon whom the next pope might be. I will tell you for sure, cardinals talk about this sort of thing all of the time, and not just because they'd like to become pope. Honest to God, most cardinals would run screaming in the night at the thought of becoming pope. It's rather because they understand the great truth. The great truth is that casting a vote for the next pope is the single most important thing they're ever going to do in their entire lives. And they want as much information as possible to try to get that choice right. Of course, as Catholics, we believe the Holy Spirit is involved in the process, but that doesn't relieve cardinals of the burden of exercising their own intelligence and judgment. So, in response to the claim that there's something wrong with this kind of thinking, I would say there's something wrong with not doing it. If you don't, well, let me put it differently. If you understand the magnitude and importance of the papacy, both spiritually and also geopolitically, then you absolutely have to be thinking about the consequences of what might come next. The public, including the Catholic public, has every right to have such information available to them so they can begin the thought process. And by the way, I would suggest that in a synodal church, in which all constituencies are supposed to have what the Italians call una voce in capitolo, that is a say in how things go, then it's all the more appropriate that this kind of information be made available to them so people can talk it out. Now, as for the complaint that this outfit is conservative, my basic response is, if you look at the issues that they apply to analyzing their papal candidates, it is basically a checklist of the idée fixe of the right wing of the church. Things like the blessing of same-sex unions and the Latin Mass and the Vatican deal with China. If you look at their rundown of papal candidates, many of them are quite realistic, but some of them are just quite honestly sort of more like a traditionalist dream than anything that is particularly plausible. American Cardinal Ray Burke? Really? Listen, I like Cardinal Burke. I think personally he's a very kind, gentle, sweet man. But, he is, the lightning rod par excellence, and the idea that he's going to get a 2/3 vote in the next conclave, probably not all that realistic. But, my response is, so what? To me, the test is not, does this thing lean right or left? The test is, can you learn from it? And I think the answer to that, in this case, is absolutely yes. Edward Penton, Diane Montagna, I know them, they're friends of ours. They've been to social functions in our house. And yes, they're fairly conservative, but they're also smart, hardworking, well-connected, and therefore, you always learn something by considering what they have to say. You will make of their spin of that information what you want, okay? And so, let me just say, I think it is time, once and for all, to put to rest this tired old canard that there is something off-putting, ill-mannered, ill-bred about talking about the next pope. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is a mammothly important conversation in which everyone has a stake. And, the more the merrier, I think, is the way we ought to approach it. All right, second up. This week, we've got cruising in Corsica. So Pope Francis, on Sunday, traveled to the French island of Corsica, to the capital city of Ajaccio, where he spent basically the entire day. The ostensible purpose for the trip was to close out a conference on popular piety. He also, while he was there, he met with bishops, priests, seminarian, religious, young people, other groups. And in part, the purpose of this visit was for the Pope to press his agenda on the Mediterranean region. This is one of the Pope's sort of strategic ideas, that he wants to sort of thank the various parts of the Mediterranean, that is Southern Europe, the Middle East, and Northern Africa, as forming sort of cultural unit, sharing a destiny in issues such as migrants and refugees, climate change, war and peace, and so on, and therefore bringing together the various constituents in the Mediterranean to make common cause. I mean, in a way, it's Francis's version of the ancient Roman notion of the Mediterranean as Mare Nostrum, or our sea. In part, it was for the Pope to endorse the focus of this Congress on popular piety. Pope Francis is very much a Catholic populist. He regards himself as a leader whose legitimacy does not come from elites, and it does not come from a system, but it comes instead from the base, from the people. And he also regards the people as the ultimate touchstone for church governance and for the faith. And he thinks popular piety, so, devotions and processions and, saint feast days and so on, all of that, he sees popular piety as one expression of the thinking, the feeling, the pulse of the people in the Catholic Church. Now, in addition to all of that, this was also, every papal trip is, but this was another opportunity to sort of take the Pope's temperature. That is, to gauge his health, in this case, 2 days before his birthday. And, fundamentally, I think you would have to say the Pope passed the test. During the course of the day, he seemed energetic, engaged, didn't skip anything on his itinerary. Now, on the other hand, the proof that being 88 and having what is arguably the world's most demanding job, that does take a toll, is the fact that on the flight back to Rome, the Pope did skip his customary in-flight news conference, explaining that he was tired, promising that he would do it the next time. But, frankly, most of us were surprised that there was ever a thought of having a news conference in this flight anyway, because the flight from Corsica to Rome is essentially like 5 minutes. Even if you tried to have a press conference, in all honesty, it would be over before it even started. So on the whole, I think you would have to say that the Pope we saw on the vigil of his birthday, his 88th birthday, was a pontiff who seems good to go for some time yet to come. Right now, I think the smart money is that he is going to preside over the Jubilee of 2025, that is very much his ardent desire. Now, after that, we will see. But at least for the short term, Pope Francis does not look like someone prepared to go gentle into that good night. All right, third up this week, we have the weaponization of work. So, regular viewers of this program, or regular listeners to it as a podcast, will know that of late, the Vatican's workforce has been complaining about what they perceive to be a variety of difficulties, a variety of struggles that they are facing as Vatican employees. They have pointed to things such as pay cuts, such as the suspension of regular pay increases, such as the fact that they're not being paid bonuses for working overtime, the fact that the Vatican health system has become more difficult to access, and the fact that their salaries are not tied to the cost of living, but the rents charged for Vatican apartments are, so they are earning less but paying more, those of them that live in Vatican apartments. Finally, there is also concern that their pensions may be at risk. Even Pope Francis recently acknowledged that the pension fund is facing a potential crisis. Now, all of that has been known for some time. This past week, however, a couple of Italian publications, both of them owned by the same company, Panorama, which is a weekly magazine, and Verità, of course meaning truth, which is a daily newspaper, carried an interview with what they described as a lay Vatican employee, whom they identified by the false initials GF. And in this interview, GF not only sort of groused about the working conditions in the Vatican, but also introduced some ideological complaints. Specifically, he said that if you want to get ahead at the Vatican today, you got to join one of two groups. Either you got to join the gay lobby, which is a term that goes back to the Benedict papacy, and basically it refers to a network of people in the Vatican with skeletons in the closet. So in part, of course, that would mean people in the Vatican who are gay, but it could also mean you've got other secrets to hide, like, money secrets or whatever. But anyway, it means a network of people who are involved in things they don't want others to know about, and so they take care of each other. So that's one group. So this guy said, you either join that gay lobby or you join the Santa Marta Club, by which he meant the circles around Pope Francis. And he said, to get into the Santa Marta Club, you got to speak Spanish and you got to be liberal. He said, you got to be green, you got to be pro-immigrant, you got to be pro-Palestine, you got to be anti-American, you got to think that Nicolas Maduro, of course, the Latin American leader, that Nicolas Maduro is a saint and that Donald Trump is a devil, and on and on. And he said, if you're not part of one of those two groups, you're not going anywhere. Now, when that interview came out, the official organization of Vatican workers, it's called the Association of Lay Vatican Employees, which represents the some 4,000 lay people who work for the Vatican. This group quickly tried to distance itself from it, saying these kind of interviews, especially because they're anonymous, do nothing more than generate panic and cause heartache. They're unhelpful. They said what they would like is for the focus to be not on politics, but rather on the concrete, specific, pragmatic challenges that the workforce in the Vatican today is facing. And saying, far from anonymous leaks to the press, what they want is direct, face-to-face, constructive conversation with the authorities in the Vatican to try to resolve these problems. Unfortunately, they said, they have been asking for this kind of dialogue for some time, and so far, they've been blown off. I mean, the doors have remained closed rather than being open. It is odd, by the way, that these requests were even being made during the course of the Pope's Synod on Synodality, where the whole idea was that everybody deserves a place at the table. His own workforce was on the outside knocking on the door, and at least according to them, they couldn't get a place at the table. They wouldn't even be let in through the door. We will see how all this plays out, but the point for now is that they want the focus to be on the pragmatic, not the ideological stuff, which they see as a distraction from the real cause of reform when it comes to the situation facing Vatican employees. All right. So fourth up with this week, we've got now you see it, now you don't. So for some time now, there has been a kind of cause célèbre in the Vatican media, in the Italian media about the Vatican regarding an event scheduled for September 6th of next year, that is, during the Jubilee year of 2025. So the outfit in the Vatican responsible for organizing next year's Jubilee year is the Dicastery for Evangelization. It's also responsible for organizing the 35 major events of the Jubilee year. So these are the Vatican-sponsored events, such as the openings of the Holy Doors, Jubilees for certain specific groups, such as deacons, priests, bishops, consecrated religious, and so on. But in addition to that, the Dicastery for Evangelization is also keeping a master calendar of all sorts of other events during the Jubilee that are not planned by the Vatican, but are planned by other groups to happen during the Jubilee year. So these groups in some cases are dioceses or religious orders. Some of them are Catholic organizations. And if you go on this master calendar, which is available online, you will find that virtually every day during 2025, one group or another has something going on. So, some time back, it had been noted in the Italian media that on September 6, 2025, an Italian group by the name of La Tenda di Giornata, or the Jonathan's Tent, had scheduled a pilgrimage of LGBTQ plus Catholics to the holy sites in Rome to mark the Jubilee. Now, at the time that this first came to light, there were some conservative and traditionalist groups that, got a little bit, had their feathers ruffled a bit about it, saw this as pastorally and doctrinally dubious, although nobody was terribly surprised this was happening during the Francis papacy, but nevertheless, some people were just a little, maybe not fully sold about it. Now, what really caused the cause célèbre this past week, however, was when all of a sudden that event was no longer on the Vatican's master calendar for Jubilee events. It was suddenly gone. And if you try to click on archived versions of the calendar, it would say page not found, okay? And this caused a round of speculation that maybe the Dicastery for Evangelization had canceled this event or was attempting to suppress it. Perhaps they had caved in to this conservative and traditionalist pressure, whatever. And so it kind of became a contretemps until over the weekend, a spokesperson for the Dicastery for Evangelization told Italian media that, hey, no, there's no conspiracy going on here. She said the deal simply is that if we're going to put something on the calendar, there are just some basic information we need to have, like, roughly how many people are coming and contact information for the group that's sponsoring it and stuff like that. And she said, we realized that some of that information was missing for this event, So we just took it off the calendar until we can collect all that. The minute we have it, it will go back up. So she was saying this was not, intended to suppress or cancel the event. It was simply making sure that all the logistical ducks were in a row. So obviously, people will be watching to make sure the event reappears on the Jubilee calendar. But, this got me thinking. I mean, she also said that basically any group that wants to can, have a pilgrimage. And assuming it just provides this basic data, it can get in the Vatican calendar, which made me wonder, is that really true? I mean, for instance, if a group of Latin Mass devotees wanted to have their own Jubilee day, could they just send in their contact info and end up in the Vatican calendar or something like that? I mean, I don't know. Maybe so, but, it would be interesting to see how such a thing might play out. In any event, the bottom line here is apparently the LGBTQ plus Jubilee Day, Jubilee pilgrimage, is back on. At least that's the official Vatican position. Finally, this week, FaceTime with Francis. Last Monday, 3 journalists who have been covering the accusations of abuse and cover-up surrounding the sodality of Christian life. This is a movement founded in Peru in 1971 by layman Luis Fernando Figari, which has since spread to a number of other countries, including the United States. And it includes now 4 different organizations. The Sodality for Consecrated Men is at the heart of it, but there's a group for consecrated women, group of nuns, and a Christian life movement. All of these groups. So there's 3 journalists, 2 Peruvians, Pedro Salinas, a Paula Ugaz, and also my wife, Elise Ann Allen, all 3 of whom have been reporting on these groups for some time, had a private audience with Pope Francis to brief him on what they have found. Now, that meeting followed the fact that not long ago, Pope Francis had given a different meeting to 2 individuals who have ties to the SCV, who wanted to sort of respond to some of the criticism that the movement has been getting. And so that movement made it look temporarily like the Pope was expressing sympathy maybe for the SCV, that maybe he thought that some of the charges and disciplinary moves that have been taken, and maybe some of those had gone too far, whatever. Pari passu, this meeting this last Monday, was seen as a gesture of sympathy and understanding from the Pope for the accusers of the SCV, the alleged survivors and victims of abuse from the SCV and some of its personnel. And of course, this is often the standard Pope Francis style, right? He can be hard to pin down. He likes to keep people guessing. He will move in a certain direction until people are certain that that's where he stands, and then he'll suddenly zigzag and move in a different direction and create a different set of perceived possibilities. And then, as soon as people are convinced, okay, now we know what the Pope wants, he'll move yet again, right? I mean, part of this is just the Pope's personality. I think part of it is a governance style that, he wants people to understand that he is his own man. He's not in the pocket or under the thumb of any particular camp or constituency in the church. Whether you call this shrewd leadership or whether you call it frustrating confusion, it is nevertheless simply part of the equation when it comes to Pope Francis. We will monitor next developments on the SCV case. There continues to be speculation. So there continues to be some speculation that the SCV and its related groups may be suppressed I mean, this is Pope Francis. You never know what he's going to do until he does it, but, we will follow events. In the meantime, do read Elise's write-up of her FaceTime with Francis. It's very interesting. Programming note, we will not be on the air for the next 2 weeks. We'll be off for the Christmas and New Year's holiday. So the next time we're together will be Tuesday, January 7th. So I hope you have fantastic and blessed holidays. I hope they are restful, peaceful, and full of joy. Until we see one another again, stay safe, stay healthy, have a fantastic and blessed break, and I will talk to you again very soon.